So the first crops we start for in spring are basically your chards, your silver beet, beetroot, beans, peas, onions, lettuce. All of that sort of stuff can be concentrated on your first few weeks of spring. The reason why these are all so big is they were left to overwinter, so that we have always had some greens during the winter, some perpetual perennial spinach there, and the rainbow chard, and the new crops go in behind it, so that when these are finished at the end of summer, the second half will be right to overwinter for the next season. Okay, so here we have our kale bed. We've grown a couple of quite rare varieties this year. We're just trialling a couple. This one's a kale yard kale from Scotland. It's an extremely old heirloom variety. And this one here's from Britain also. It's a sea kale. And this one grows wild along the coast. And in fact, this one would have sustained the ancient Romans and Greeks. It's a very, very old variety. And this one here is your Tuscan kale, your black kale, which is the common one. So kales can be put in any time of the year. And again, I would normally have a bed that I overwinter. That hasn't been done this year because I needed the space and I redone them. But there's no real need to overwinter it because kale you can plant in succession all year. So this is our new crop of rainbow chard, and it's a green leafy vegetable. So all the green leafy vegetables, we're eating the leaves. But when we're talking about tomatoes, cucumbers, pumpkins, capsicums, eggplants, they're a fruit that forms and they need pollination from bees. So every few beds, I plant some sort of flowers or herbs that attract bees. This is a borage, so the young leaves can be eaten, and especially the dark blue flowers are great in salad. But the bees absolutely love them. So every few beds, put one in the middle. So why organic? Because this is produce, fresh as nature intended. You can't walk into a supermarket and do that, because your produce is sprayed and treated with hundreds of chemicals that are on the accepted chemical list that are okay today, but when we start finding out the ill effects of what it does to our body, in 20 years' time, they'll be on the banned list. That's what happened with things like DDT and other very dangerous chemicals that are now banned, are now cancerous. We lose several chemicals a year off the list that we were allowed to use, and now we're not allowed to use. So the chemicals they're using today, which are accepted today, are on the banned list in 10 years' time. Do we actually know what we're putting into our bodies? We haven't got a clue, because they don't have to disclose everything that goes onto these fruits and vegetables. Why is that a problem? Because you feed these unknown substances into your family, yourself, your children. And your children are not responsible for what they're fed, you are. So we have a responsibility to our families, to our health, about the things that we put into our bodies. And with all the chemicals that are accepted to be used in standard farming practices, if you buy organic, they're not accepted. There is a reason for that, is because there are no good chemicals that are used in plant production. They are all dangerous because they're used to kill insects, to kill bacteria, and what the system says that in small quantities that it's okay for human consumption. So if they tested this rainbow chard from a supermarket and said it has so many parts per million of an accepted chemical, so that's not dangerous, what happens when you're eating that 365 days of the year for 40 years? Suddenly you have a problem, because they don't take that into consideration. What happens is that these things build up in your system just like heavy metals do, like mercury. Toxins build up in your tissues, your fat cells, your liver. And what happens is you're not going to see any detrimental effects from one meal or even from 6 months of eating it. But over 40 years, we start to see the effects of ingesting dangerous chemicals. We don't need to do that. Buy organic produce. Australia has one of the best systems of maintaining organic certification, so people have to pass their certification on a regular basis. If they're found to have used something that isn't acceptable in the test, they're taken off the list. So buy organic produce. Your supermarkets are starting to get more of it now because it's a case of demand. And the more you demand it, the more they'll stock, the more it becomes available, and the cheaper it will become. Buy organic. It's better for you, it's better for the planet. Okay, so let's have a look at an example of seedlings. These are lettuce. These are around about 2 weeks old. And we do ours in individual peat pots. It's a little bit more expensive, but the reason we do it is because we avoid the transplant shock. As you can see, the roots all form on the outside. There's no need to take the pot off the outside. You just dig a hole, plant it at soil level, and the plants take off as if they were planted directly into the ground. So there's no setback or shock whatsoever. So with these, we plant 3 or 4 seeds. As soon as the strongest one comes up, we cull out the others, we thin them out, and just grow on the strongest seedling. So this is lettuce. We do many other types, different times of the year. We're doing these now, it's autumn. And we'll just have a quick look at how we prepare these little pots. So the product we use for the base of our seed raising mix and for all the sprouting, the wheatgrass and the sprouts, is coconut coir peat, which is the leftover product of the coconut industry. The outside of the coconuts are ground up into a peat-like substance. It has no peat moss in it, but it's called coconut coir peat. Now, the thing you've got to remember is that because we're organic, you have to make sure that there isn't any synthetic fertilizer in the product when you buy it. So this one has no fertilizer added. So basically, it just needs a soak. Now, the way we get around the fertilizer issue, you don't need to add fertilizer, because as far as growing on your sprouts or starting off your seedlings, a seed has enough energy inside it to get them going. But if you're going to grow them on for any period of time, a little bit of fertilizer is good. So because this has none, we pop that in a bucket that's big enough to handle it when it expands. Now, a brick that size takes 4.5 litres of water. So we're using the Seasol, the seaweed concentrate. It is certified organic. So we just use the required amount. And we just mix that in. Now this will just soak. It only needs 2-3 hours. We leave it overnight. We pop that in and you end up with about 9 litres of coconut coir peat. And here's what it looks like after it's been soaking about 4 or 5 hours. So it's very loose, soft, and we would use this to plant our sprouts on, or our wheat straight onto this. Or in the case of our seedlings, we use this as 50% of our seed raising mix. And we'll show you how we mix that up. For our seed raising mix, we start with our own compost, but you could use a seed raising mix, preferably an organic one. And we give that a couple of sieves to get out all the big material. After our first sieve, we'll give that a second sieve, and we just use a lighter, finer grade sieve. It's a little time consuming, but it's well worth the effort. So what we end up with is a very fine, rich compost material, and then we add 50% of this and 50% with our coconut coir peat moss, and we end up with this. This is our finished product. It's very light, it retains moisture extremely well, and it's very easy for the seedlings to push up without compacting, and we've found that to be the most successful seed raising formula. Okay, so the process of starting off the seedlings is we've got our premium quality seed raising mix. We start off with our 55 ml little peat pots. These come in a packet. You can just buy these at Bunnings, and you buy the trays that they fit in. I put them in a solid base tray, so if you fill that up with water, they take it up from the base. You don't have to try and water your seedlings from the top and wash off the soil, which makes it difficult for very fine seeds. Now, the thing with these is, though, I haven't been able to find them at Bunnings, so I buy mine just online on the internet. I think these ones came off eBay. So you're just after a solid base tray, and the 55 ml trays come from Bunnings. We just pop these in. We'll just do a few just to show. So you pop those in there. You just grab a handful, just run it over the top. Now I just push it down lightly with 2 fingers, and then one more run over the top, and basically that's it. You plant your seeds directly into that, fill the base with water, pop it in, it soaks up the water, it soaks the pot, and you get the adequate amount of moisture in there, and it's the easiest way to keep them continually moist. Just keep topping the base up with water. It's also how we fertilise ours, by mixing the seaweed and concentrate and just pouring it into there as well, and they just take up what they need. I'll show you the process of how we grow wheatgrass, but the process for wheatgrass and growing sprouts on a medium is the same. What we use for our wheatgrass is a milling wheat, a certified organic milling wheat. Okay, so one important point about the wheat that you use is that it must be fresh. So if you just go to your cupboard and get some wheat out, you might get a 30–50% germination rate. But if you buy fresh wheat, you'll get a 100% germination rate. It'll come up nice and quickly, and it won't yellow off, and you'll get beautiful, healthy growth. So make sure that you're always buying fresh wheat. The process that we go through, a lot of people would say, why do you bother growing wheatgrass on a medium at all? Because you can just soak it and put it on some paper towel and grow it. Well, you can, but the problem is that that's not organic. When you've got paper towel, it's been bleached in chemicals, and when you place the seed on there and it takes up those chemicals, you're consuming those chemicals, and that's not organic, and it's not a wise thing to do, since that you're taking the wheatgrass for health, because it just concentrates all those chemicals. If you took a piece of paper towel and squeezed it out, you'd have this liquid with the chemicals and the bleach in it. You wouldn't drink that, but that's exactly what you're going to do if you're going to grow wheatgrass on it. So we're growing it on a completely safe medium. It just gives the roots something to get into, because wheatgrass, you get 2 crops. Once you've had your wheatgrass come up, you crop it off and you'll get a second crop off it. Now, we'll just show you. We use 1 cup of wheat. I use a sieve and a bowl that the sieve will fit into, so it's easy to take it in and out. And you can run that underwater if you want. I don't think there's any need. Basically just fill that up, make sure all the grains of wheat are wet, and then we just soak that overnight. Now, here's one that we soaked overnight. You can see the difference. The grains have all swollen up. They've taken up all the water they're going to take up. If you leave it much longer than that, there's a chance that they'll start fermenting. Now we'll show you the medium that we grow it on. And we're back to our coconut coir peat. This doesn't have any soil in it at all. It's just the coconut coir peat and soaked in that mild solution of Seasol, which is organic seaweed fertilizer. We basically just give that a thin coating. Just flatten it out. I usually use a piece of wood just to flatten it out, but it's not that necessary. We tip that over the top. Just spread it out. Doesn't have to be done precisely. Just give it an even coat. And what happens is that the roots come through the bottom, and if there's a well of water in here, that's basically enough for 2, 3 days, 4 days. It just pops in there, it soaks it up, and you don't have the problem of continually having to spray it 2 or 3 times a day. So that'll save you with all the watering. And then we just give that a fine mist of water with a rose spray. Pop it into a dark cupboard. Some people place a sheet of paper or cardboard over the top, and when the sprouts lift the paper or the cardboard up, they know to bring it out into the light. I just put it in a dark cupboard basically for about 2 or 3 days, and then we get our first stage of shooting, and that's approximately at day 3. And that's 1 day. The difference that 1 day makes as soon as you take it out into the sun. You can do this in your kitchen. Filtered sunlight, not direct sunlight, because it dries it out far too quickly. So that's day 4 and growing very healthy. We're going to plant some early potatoes. These ones are an Australian variety called Talangi Delight, a purple variety. Great for using as new potatoes early. So we're just going to show you a few tools that make it easy for planting in any sort of vegetable bed. Most people, after you just get used to it, you don't really worry, but to start off with, there are things you can use like plumb lines of some sort to keep your rows straight. So you just keep moving those at the same distance and everything's all nice and square. Otherwise you can end up with something that looks rather higgledy by the time you get to the end. And you can cut sticks or pieces of tube with the length written on it when you grow so many different things and you know what the spacing is, like the potatoes, 40 centimetre. So you mark where your first one is. You can use little markers, just go 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there. And you can sort of do that all the way down the bed, 40 centimetres apart. It's there, starts the next one, there, and then it's completely uniform all the way down. So all you do is you just dig your hole, and just a handful of organic fertiliser mixed in the bottom of the hole. These potatoes have been chitted already, which means they're left out in the light, not in the direct sun, but just in the light for a month or so, so their eyes start to develop, and you put the strongest ones to the top. Now, just a point, I'm not going to bother knocking any of these shoots off, the chits. A lot of people knock them all off and just leave the strongest one, and that means you'll get fewer potatoes, but you'll get much bigger potatoes. So every branch that comes up here will grow potatoes off it, but the more that the one plant has to support the more growth, the smaller the potatoes. So it's just choice.